Desmond was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and luxury. He lived in a massive mansion with countless rooms, had a fleet of expensive cars, and more money than he could ever spend. But despite having it all, he felt empty. Every woman he met seemed to only care about his wealth, not who he truly was. They admired his lifestyle, his status, and the luxury he provided, but no one cared about the man beneath it all. Tired of fake relationships, Desmond longed for something real. He wanted to be loved for who he was, not for his money. One evening, as he sat alone in his grand home, he came up with a bold idea. If money was the problem, he would take it out of the equation. He would pretend to be an ordinary taxi driver, a man with no wealth, no status, just a regular guy trying to make a living. If a woman truly cared for him despite his simple life, he would know her love was real. The next day, he wasted no time. He went out and bought an old, beat-up taxi. It wasn't new, and it made strange noises when it moved, but that was exactly what he wanted. He dressed in plain clothes, left his luxurious lifestyle behind, and stepped into the world as just another driver. As he drove through the city streets, waiting for passengers, he felt both nervous and excited. Would his plan work? Could he really find someone who loved him for himself, not for his fortune? Only time would tell. Desmond spent his first few days as a taxi driver adjusting to his new reality. The job was simple: pick up passengers, take them where they needed to go, and repeat. At first, he found it exciting. It was a completely different world from the one he was used to. No one treated him like a billionaire. To them, he was just another driver, invisible and unimportant. Some passengers were polite, others ignored him completely, and a few were rude. But no one truly cared about the man behind the wheel. Then one day, Desmond picked up a woman named Amina. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed kind. At first, he thought she might be different, but soon her true nature showed. She started asking for small amounts of money, claiming she needed help. At first, Desmond gave it to her, curious to see if she was genuine, but as time passed, her requests grew larger. It became clear Amina didn't care about him, only what she thought he could give her. She was no different from the others. Just as Desmond was beginning to lose hope, he met Blessing. She was unlike anyone else. She didn't ask for money or favors. She simply talked to him, asked about his day, and listened. For the first time, Desmond felt seen not as a rich man or a taxi driver, but as a person. When she paid her fare and walked away, he found himself hoping she would call his taxi again. Maybe, just maybe, he had finally found something real. For the first time in a long while, Desmond felt something different: hope. Every time Blessing got into his taxi, their conversations flowed effortlessly. She never asked for anything, never hinted at wanting money or favors. Instead, she was genuinely curious about him, asking how his day was going and sharing little pieces of her own life. She worked hard to support her family, lived a simple life, and found happiness in the little things. Desmond admired her for that. Over the next few weeks, he made sure to be around the same area at the same time, hoping to pick her up again. Each ride gave them more time to talk, and with every conversation, Desmond felt himself falling for her. But a question lingered in his mind: was her kindness real? Would she still care for him if she knew the truth about who he really was? One day, he decided to test her. He told Blessing how hard life was as a taxi driver, how the money was barely enough to get by. He watched her face closely, searching for any hint of disappointment. But instead of looking discouraged, she simply smiled and told him, "Money isn't everything. Kindness, honesty, and love are what truly matter." At that moment, Desmond knew she was different. She wasn't like the others. She cared about the man, not his wealth. His heart raced with the realization that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. It was time to tell her the truth. But would she forgive him for the lie? Desmond knew he couldn't keep pretending forever. He'd found what he was looking for: someone who cared about him for who he truly was, not for his money or status. But now, he faced a new fear. Would Blessing be angry that he had lied? Would she walk away once she found out the truth? He had to take the risk. A few days later, he invited Blessing to meet him at a quiet park. He was more nervous than he had ever been before. When she arrived, he took a deep breath and told her everything: the truth about who he was, why he had been pretending, and how much she meant to him. He braced himself for her reaction. To his surprise, Blessing didn't look shocked or upset. She simply smiled and said, "I fell in love with you, not your money." Her words lifted a weight off Desmond's chest. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen. With his secret out in the open, Desmond was ready to take the next step. He introduced Blessing to his world, showing her the life he had kept hidden. But despite the luxury around her, she remained the same humble, kind, and genuine. She didn't change, and that made Desmond love her even more. Now, there was only one thing left to do: introduce her to his parents. He had no doubt in his heart that Blessing was the one. But he also knew that his family might not see things the same way. He could only hope they would understand. Desmond was eager to introduce Blessing to his parents. He knew they had always wanted the best for him, but he also knew their definition of best was different from his. To them, the right woman was someone from a wealthy family, someone who understood their world of power and prestige. But to Desmond, none of that mattered. He'd finally found someone who loved him for who he was, not for his fortune. That was all that should count. On the day of the visit, Blessing dressed modestly, just as she always did. As they drove up to his family's grand mansion, she couldn't help but feel nervous, but Desmond reassured her, holding her hand tightly. When they arrived, his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Oba, were waiting in the living room, their expressions warm at first. But the moment their eyes landed on Blessing, everything changed. The warmth disappeared, replaced by cold, calculating stares. Desmond introduced her proudly, telling them how kind and caring she was. He shared their love story, how she had loved him when she thought he was just a taxi driver, how she had never cared about his wealth. His mother cleared her throat, choosing her words carefully. "Desmond, we love you and want the best for you," she began. "But this girl, she is not from our world. She doesn't belong here." His father nodded in agreement. "You are the heir to a great empire. You need a wife who understands our family's responsibilities. Blessing comes from nothing. She will never fit in." Desmond was stunned. He had expected hesitation, maybe some questions, but outright rejection, that he hadn't prepared for. Desmond couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had hoped his parents would see Blessing the way he did: kind, humble, and full of love. But instead, all they saw was her background. They didn't even try to get to know her. "You don't even know her," Desmond argued, his voice filled with frustration. "She's kind, strong, and she loves me for who I am, not for my money or my name. Isn't that what really matters?" His mother shook her head. "Love is not enough, Desmond. Marriage is about more than just feelings. It's about family, status, and making the right choices for your future." His father added, "We have business partnerships to maintain. The woman you marry will be a reflection of our family. Blessing may be a good person, but she is not the right match for you." Desmond clenched his fists. He had always respected his parents, but this time, he couldn't agree with them. "I don't care about her background. Blessing is the woman I love, and that's all that matters to me." He turned to Blessing, who had remained quiet throughout the conversation, her expression unreadable. He could see the hurt in her eyes, but she held her head high. She had never pretended to be someone she wasn't, and she wasn't ashamed of where she came from. "Let's go," he said softly, taking her hand. His parents called after him, but he didn't stop. As they walked out of the mansion, Desmond felt a mix of anger and sadness. He had found the love of his life, but now he was being forced to choose between her and his family, and he already knew his answer. Desmond and Blessing left the mansion in silence. The weight of his parents' rejection hung heavy between them. He had fought for their approval, hoping they would see what he saw in Blessing. But they had made their decision: status and wealth mattered more to them than love. As they drove back to Blessing's small home, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but filled with concern. "Desmond, I don't want to come between you and your family. I know how much they mean to you. Maybe they're right. Maybe we come from different worlds." Desmond tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "No, Blessing." Blessing smiled at his words, but Desmond could tell she was still worried. Over the next few weeks, they tried to move forward, but things weren't the same. Desmond was no longer welcome at his family home. His father refused to speak to him, and his mother only called to try to convince him to leave Blessing. Then, one evening, Desmond received a call from his father. His voice was cold, final. "Since you refuse to listen to us, you are no longer part of this family. Your access to the family's wealth is cut off. You are on your own." Desmond sat in silence, the words sinking in. He had expected resistance, maybe even a fight, but not this. He had given up everything: his fortune, his status, his family, all for love. But as he turned to Blessing, who reached for his hand with quiet strength, he knew one thing: He had no regrets. Desmond had always lived a life of luxury, surrounded by wealth and privilege. But now, everything was gone. His father had stripped him of his fortune, his status, and even his place in the family. He had nothing left except blessing. With nowhere else to go, Desmond moved in with her. Her home was small and modest, nothing like the grand mansion he'd grown up in. The walls were thin, the furniture was old, and there was no staff to cater to his every need. But despite the simplicity, there was warmth here, something his mansion had never truly given him. At first, Desmond adjusted well. He took small jobs, working at a local garage fixing cars. The pay was meager, nothing compared to what he once earned, but he didn't mind. He was willing to do whatever it took to build a life with Blessing. But over time, things became harder. Blessing saw how much he was struggling. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he tried to hide his frustration when bills piled up. Desmond never complained, but she knew this life wasn't easy for him. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Blessing finally spoke. "Desmond, I love you, but this isn't the life you were meant for. You don't belong here. You deserve better." Desmond looked at her, his heart heavy. "I don't care about money, Blessing. All I need is you." But Blessing shook her head. "It's not about money. It's about your happiness." And deep down, Desmond knew she was right. Desmond sat in silence, Blessing's words echoing in his mind. He had fought so hard for their love, given up everything, his wealth, his family, his status. But now, she was telling him to go back. It wasn't just one conversation. Blessing brought it up again and again, always with the same plea. "You deserve better, Desmond. You don't belong in this life. You need to go back to your family." Desmond refused at first. He loved Blessing, and no amount of wealth could replace what they had. But as the days passed, he saw the sadness in her eyes. She was struggling not because she didn't love him, but because she couldn't bear to see him live like this. The man she had fallen in love with had once had everything, and now he had nothing. She carried the weight of that sacrifice, and it was breaking her. After many sleepless nights, Desmond finally made his decision. If Blessing couldn't be happy like this, then he had to try something else. The next day, he went to see his father. It had been weeks since they last spoke. He had no idea how his father would react, but he knew he had no choice. When Desmond arrived at his father's office, the older man looked up, surprised but not shocked. He had always expected his son to return. A slow, satisfied smile spread across Mr. Oba's face. "So, you finally come to your senses." Desmond swallowed hard, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. "I'm back," he said quietly, "but I need your help." Desmond stood before his father, feeling like a man caught between two worlds. He had walked away from wealth to be with the woman he loved, but now he was here asking for help, just as Blessing had begged him to do. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that he had to return or the fact that it was the only way to make Blessing happy. Mr. Oba leaned back in his chair, watching his son with quiet satisfaction. "Of course you need my help. You've learned your lesson. But if you want to regain everything, there's something you must do." Desmond clenched his jaw. He had known there would be conditions. His father continued, "You know how important our family name is. You know I've always made decisions to strengthen our legacy. My best friend and I have planned for years to unite our families. If you want to return, you will marry his daughter, Evelyn." Desmond felt his stomach drop. He had expected his father to demand loyalty, maybe a return to the family business. But this, marrying Evelyn spoiled, selfish Evelyn, was the last thing he wanted. He shook his head. "I can't marry her, father. She's not the right person for me." His father's smile faded. "You have no choice, Desmond. This is the price of coming back." Desmond sat frozen, his heart pounding. He had come here for Blessing, for their future. But now, he was faced with an impossible choice: reclaim his place in the family or walk away forever. And this time, if he walked away, there would be no coming back. Desmond had fought so hard to be with Blessing. He had given up his fortune, his status, and even his family to prove that love mattered more than wealth. But now, faced with his father's ultimatum, he felt trapped. Marrying Evelyn meant securing his place back in the family, regaining his fortune, and ensuring a stable future. But it also meant giving up on the love he had fought for. Deep down, he knew Evelyn wasn't the woman for him. She was everything Blessing wasn't: spoiled, self-absorbed, and obsessed with wealth. But his father had made it clear this was the only way. Desmond struggled with the decision for days, barely able to eat or sleep. Every time he looked at Blessing, he saw the worry in her eyes. She wanted him to go back, but she had never imagined it would come at such a price. One night, after hours of painful silence, Blessing finally spoke. "Desmond, maybe this is for the best," she whispered, her voice heavy with sadness. "I don't want you to suffer because of me. If marrying Evelyn means getting your life back, maybe you should do it." Her words shattered him. He wanted to fight, to tell her that their love was worth more than money. But the pain in her eyes told him she'd already made peace with losing him. The next morning, Desmond gave his father an answer. "I'll do it," he said, his voice hollow. And just like that, his fate was sealed. He would marry Evelyn. But as he walked away from Blessing for the last time, he knew he had just lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The wedding was grand, just as Evelyn had always dreamed. The hall shimmered with gold decorations. The guests were dressed in the finest designer clothes, and the air buzzed with laughter and champagne toasts. But for Desmond, it all felt empty. He went through the motions, smiling for pictures, exchanging vows, but his heart wasn't there. It had been left behind, with Blessing. After the ceremony, Desmond moved into the family mansion with Evelyn, just as his father had planned. But the reality of his new life quickly set in. Evelyn was everything he had feared: careless, entitled, and indifferent to him beyond his name and status. She spent her days shopping, partying, and flaunting her wealth, while Desmond felt like a prisoner in his own home. Meanwhile, Blessing faced her own struggle. She had sacrificed her love for Desmond, believing she was doing what was best for him. But as she carried his unborn children, she realized that love was not something that could be erased. No amount of wealth or status could replace what they had shared. When Desmond eventually discovered that Blessing had given birth to his twins, it was too late. His marriage to Evelyn was nothing more than a transaction, and his father's empire felt more like a burden than a blessing. This story, though fictional, reflects a reality many people face. Society often values wealth and status over true love and happiness. Many sacrifice their hearts for security, only to find themselves trapped in a life that feels meaningless. The lesson? Money can buy luxury, but it can't buy love. True happiness isn't found in status or wealth, but in the people who see us for who we truly are. In the end, Desmond learned that the hard way. Let's not make the same mistake.